Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
Throughout the history of the United States, racial classification has been shaped by a variety of socio-political forces, legal frameworks, and deeply entrenched ideologies about race and identity. One of the most enduring and insidious of these constructs is the one-drop rule, a racial classification system that deemed any individual with even the smallest trace of African ancestry as black. The rule, which originated in the 18th and 19th centuries and became codified into law during the 20th century, has had far-reaching consequences on the identity and self-perception of mixed heritage individuals, particularly those of both African and Native American descent. For centuries, Indigenous and African peoples have shared histories of oppression, resistance, and cultural intermingling in North America. From early encounters in the colonial era to the forced removals and enslavement that bound them together under systems of racialized subjugation, these two groups have interwoven their stories in complex ways. However, the imposition of the one-drop rule created a stark racial boundary that severely impacted Black Native identity, pushing individuals of mixed heritage into an imposed blackness while simultaneously erasing or denying their Native ancestry. The rule not only influenced social perceptions and community belonging but also had tangible legal and economic ramifications, particularly in relation to tribal enrollment, land rights, and access to federal recognition as Native Americans. This article delves into the historical evolution of the one-drop rule, its effects on Black Native identity, and the ongoing struggles of those who seek to reclaim and affirm both sides of their heritage. By examining legal cases, tribal policies, personal narratives, and historical records, we can better understand how this racial classification system has shaped the experiences of Black Native people and continues to influence their identity in the present day. The origins of the one-drop rule can be traced back to the colonial period, when European settlers and lawmakers sought to establish clear racial distinctions to uphold systems of slavery and indigenous displacement. In the early years of European colonization, racial boundaries were not as rigid as they later became. Africans, indigenous peoples, and Europeans intermingled, forming relationships that resulted in mixed heritage offspring. However, as the institution of slavery became more entrenched in the American South, laws were enacted to maintain a strict racial hierarchy. The one-drop rule gained prominence in the 19th century as a means of legally defining blackness in a way that ensured the continued subjugation of individuals with African ancestry. It was designed to prevent mixed-race individuals from claiming the legal privileges of whiteness while also ensuring that the economic system of slavery remained intact. This rule was reinforced through laws such as Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924, which legally classified any individual with even a trace of African ancestry as black. Though its primary aim was to solidify racial boundaries between black and white populations, the rule also had profound consequences for those of mixed Black and Native American descent, as it effectively denied their indigenous heritage. Long before the implementation of racial purity laws, African and Indigenous peoples shared overlapping histories in North America. Some of the earliest interactions between Africans and Native Americans occurred in the 16th and 17th centuries, when escaped African slaves sought refuge among Native American tribes. Many tribes, including the Seminole, Creek, Cherokee, and Choctaw, incorporated African-descended individuals into their communities. These relationships resulted in mixed heritage populations who identified with both cultures and carried forward the traditions of both their African and Native ancestors. However, the expansion of racial classification laws, coupled with government-imposed policies such as the Indian Removal Act of 1830, further complicated Black Native identity. Many Native American tribes were forcibly relocated to the West, while African Americans remained ensnared in slavery. Some tribes, such as the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole, practiced slavery themselves, leading to complex relationships between Black people and Native nations. After the Civil War, the U.S. government required certain tribes to grant citizenship to their formerly enslaved people, resulting in the creation of the category known as freedmen. Despite their historical ties to these nations, freedmen often faced discrimination from tribal governments, particularly in the late 19th and 20th centuries. By the time the one-drop rule became widely accepted in the United States, it had profound implications for those of Black and Native descent. Many Black natives found themselves classified solely as Black, regardless of their indigenous ancestry. This erasure was reinforced by legal definitions, census records, and tribal policies that often excluded individuals with African ancestry from being recognized as members of Native nations. In some cases, Native American tribes, influenced by the racial attitudes of the broader American society, adopted exclusionary policies that barred Black Native individuals from full tribal citizenship. This was particularly evident in the early 20th century when tribes sought federal recognition and financial benefits from the U.S. government. Some tribes revised their membership criteria to exclude individuals with African ancestry, arguing that they were not authentic Native Americans despite centuries of shared history and intermarriage. Despite the historical forces that sought to erase their identity, Black natives have continually fought to reclaim their heritage. In recent decades, individuals and advocacy groups have pushed for greater recognition of Black Native history and identity. Legal battles over tribal citizenship, land rights, and federal recognition continue to unfold, highlighting the enduring impact of the one-drop rule and the resilience of those who refuse to be defined by externally imposed racial categories. The struggle for recognition is not just a legal battle, but also a deeply personal one. Many Black natives have sought to reconnect with their indigenous traditions, learn their ancestral languages, and participate in tribal cultural practices. Their efforts challenge the rigid racial classifications that have historically denied them their full heritage and affirm the complexity of their identities. The one-drop rule has had lasting repercussions on the identity of Black natives, shaping the way they have been perceived and treated within both African American and Native American communities. This rigid racial classification system not only stripped many individuals of their rightful claim to their indigenous heritage, but also reinforced the systemic marginalization of those with African ancestry. However, the legacy of Black Native identity is one of resilience, resistance, and reclamation. By acknowledging and confronting the historical injustices that have shaped their experiences, Black natives continue to assert their rightful place in both African American and Native American histories. Their stories serve as a testament to the endurance of identity and the power of self-definition in the face of imposed racial boundaries.